Hello everyone, Jester Bell, aka Female Frodo Baggins is back. No, that nickname will not go away. And I was originally going to do a scream rant of a video chastising people for live-action remakes from Disney being all their fault. This would have been spurred on by that awful Moana remake trailer that we saw that looked like somebody had made an AI version of the original animated one. Like someone literally just took AI and said, make me a live-action version of the Moana movie, and that's what this live-action remake from Disney looks like. It looks overly digitized, and I'm not just talking about how much CGI is in this trailer, despite them calling it a live-action movie. I mean everything. Like, Disney just overly digitizes the look of their films. They put so much into the post-production of it, and just making sure that there's no way it can look real or authentic for anyone, and that's what the problem was with the Snow White movie. It looked overly digitized, overly processed. It's just ugly. And people were lambasting this Moana remake trailer all over the internet. It's got more dislikes than likes. All the comments under the trailer are negative. However, that doesn't mean that the movie isn't going to make a lot of money at the box office. I remember everyone was lambasting the Minecraft movie trailer online too, and that still made almost $1 billion. So I would just say that it would be unwise to assume that this Moana movie is not going to make a lot of money, especially that the unwatchable film that was Moana 2 made $1 billion at the box office as well, didn't it? I just think it's unrealistic to believe that this is not going to make money despite how bad it looks. But I want to talk about these live-action remakes and whose fault it really is for them happening, because I was originally, once again, going to do this video just chastising people for continuing to watch these movies. But I did get a comment from someone who gave me a little bit more perspective on it, and just, the question of, is it really the audience's fault for what Disney essentially feeds them? So I want to explore both sides of the argument here. So here is the argument that Disney live-action remakes and animated remakes and the continuation of them is the audience's fault. So a lot of people say that if you're going to make remakes of these animated movies, you should be doing your own thing with them. You can retell fairy tales over and over again. And the thing was, that was what Disney was doing in the beginning with the Cinderella movie and The Jungle Book. Cinderella, I think, really holds up, the 2015 one. The Jungle Book, I do not think does, and I didn't even like it when it came out. But both these movies were trying to do their own thing. They were based off of the same story, but they were trying to do their own versions of it. And I think that really worked for Cinderella, and it didn't work out so well for The Jungle Book. But while both these movies actually got good reviews at the time, I remember there were a lot of complaints that even though these movies did well, that some people were upset that they weren't more like the original animated versions. They didn't include all the songs or all of the characters and stuff like that. And then that is how, after that, you get the Beauty and the Beast live-action remake that was basically a shot-for-shot remake of the original, with all of the songs and most of the story beats, and just some changes that honestly were not for the better. But the thing is, while Beauty and the Beast was maybe the first time we started getting a lot of video essays on how bad these live-action remakes actually were, it made $1 billion at the box office easily. It was this massive hit, and that began the pattern of live-action remakes just becoming, for the Renaissance period at least, just becoming shot-for-shot recreations of the original movies. And on that level, there would be the question, can you really blame Disney for continuing to go in that direction? They're a company. I've chastised Hollywood enough for making so many counterintuitive decisions that lose them money. If they're actually making money doing something, then why not do it? No argument on how this is going to damage the industry further or how this dilutes the original is going to make them let go of the money that they're making now. But here's the thing about live-action remakes, is it seems to be only the ones from the Renaissance era and onward that really pick up at the box office post-Disney changing the way that they were doing them. And I think that there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, when Disney would go back and make movies like, say, Dumbo live-action remake, or as we know infamously from Snow White, they would need to do all that they could to modernize these movies, and this would change them quite significantly from the original. So I think with these older films that they try to bring about. Like, I think that is part of the reason why they didn't sell as much. They were awful films, like unwatchable, but also there was no nostalgia factor, just because I think both the ones that are shot-for-shot remakes and ones that are greatly changed, they both are awful movies. It's just the ones that are closer to the original have that nostalgia factor, and I think that the Renaissance ones, the live-action remakes, that they tend to do better. First of all, because they're closer to the original, because they're from more modern times, not as much has to be changed, and also that generation of parents is just now having kids that grew up with those movies, and they're taking them to see these movies that they recognize. But just to set that aside for a minute, like, it does seem that audiences are turned off from these live-action remakes, since actually a whole lot of them have flopped. And Disney, after Snow White, did have like a come to Jesus moment where it seemed that they were finally realizing that live-action remakes are not as viable. And actually, they shelved a lot of them. There was going to be an Aristocats live-action remake. There was going to be a Bambi live-action remake. Those have been taken off the board. But there was also a Tangled live-action remake. And after Snow White bombed, they put that on the shelf indefinitely. They were considering maybe not doing the Tangled live-action remake, and it seemed like we were finally out of the woods with live-action remakes because enough of them had bombed. But then the Lilo and Stitch movie came out and made almost $1 billion, or it made $1 billion because they kept it in theaters long enough, even though everyone was very critical to the changes that were made to the original story because they ruined the story of Lilo and Stitch. And so on that level, we can blame audiences for the continuation of live-action remakes because they went and saw Lilo and Stitch, and that was the big test of, is there any money left in doing these live-action remakes? And that certainly made enough money at the time. And then you all of a sudden, while they're not bringing back Aristocats and Bambi, they're still doing Moana, they're still doing Tangled, and that's back, and they're casting it right now, and we're going to get more information on that soon. I do think that Disney is more selective on the live-action remakes because they've realized it's not a surefire hit each time. I think they're sticking to the ones that they're sure that they're more modern and that they're not going to change too much from, and that way going forward they're going to be more live action remakes. So on that level, it does seem that the audience is to blame for them because Disney seriously seemed like they were going to be ending their live action remakes as long as Lilo and Stitch did not make money, and it was going to be over with. But here's the reason why people would argue our audience is really to blame for all of this, because here's the dead end I keep getting to when I blame audiences for live action remakes is if Lilo and Stitch did not make money this summer, I think the movie theater industry would have closed down because 2025 was such a bad year for movies and that barely anything picked up. So, like, if we didn't have movies that I think are awful, like Minecraft or Lilo and Stitch, like, this theater industry that I'd love to defend, it probably would have closed down. Like, I can't say that I wouldn't have wanted Lilo and Stitch to make money because the theaters needed that money. And so that's the real problem here, is that there isn't anything else. And that's what I saw from another person online kind of getting at that got me thinking. Oftentimes we like to use like food analogies when we're talking about who's to blame, the audience or the studios when it comes to this stuff. And here's the thing. Let's say you were eating at a restaurant and the food was just awful and you couldn't stomach anything there, but they also offered just regular McDonald's cheeseburgers. Now, wouldn't you eat the McDonald's cheeseburger if you were there, even though it's generic and it's technically really, really bad for you, but at least it's the thing that you know you're at least going to enjoy based on like the superficial aspects of its taste in this restaurant that serves awful food. And that's the thing about live action remakes is, what alternative would I suggest people watch in theaters right now? I'm not saying like now we're getting some good films. I really enjoyed the Zootopia sequel, like I said. But earlier this year, it's like Elio, that was an awful film, even though it was original. And so is the upcoming Hoppers movie from Pixar that just looks awful. The problem with Disney, and I've said this before, you could make a live-action remake, even though I might disagree with the principle of it. You could make one of those good, just like you could make an original film or a sequel good. The problem is behind the scenes. Disney, until recently, we'll see if they continue on a better or worse trajectory. they don't have people who understand how to do these movies. They don't understand how to do movies, period. And that's why live action remakes tend to be awful, whether they're making a lot of changes or whether they're making shot for shot remakes. They're just terrible on both levels. So it doesn't matter if they're doing very, very different renditions of the stories that, change a lot. They're not just shot for shot remakes. They're all going to be terrible. And I disagree with a lot of people who say that no one wants to go to the theater anymore. Everyone just loves the slop that they're getting on streaming as well. I think that there are people out there who like going to the theater as a novelty and like going to theaters on vacation. But what else is being offered? Would you rather go to the new original film that's just going to be a bad experience that you have no nostalgic attachment to? Or would you rather go to the film that at least gives you some good feelings because it reminds you of the film that you watched in the past as a kid and that gives you some warm feelings? They're both bad movies, but one just has some better feelings towards it just because it's based on a movie in the past. And so that's just some food for thought here, that ultimately, the audience just has to choose from what is served to them. And if they're served something that maybe is giving them a little bit of a better experience just because of nostalgia versus something where there's not even that, I can understand why audiences make that choice. And what can I say about theaters and the movie industry when they haven't offered anything different? If they didn't do them, then they would just go under entirely. What are they supposed to do until they get some original films that are actually worth being marketed to people? But right now, I do think that Disney, with their live action remakes, they're on a certain trajectory because I did think that they've learned from the past. They've learned taking films from nearly a century ago and remaking them for modern audiences does not work. They saw that with Snow White. They also seem to have realized that race bending their princesses does not work. Now, notably, Little Mermaid was a Renaissance film that didn't change the core of it from what the original was, but I do think that the controversy and the conversation becoming entirely about race bending the lead did damage it. It was the one Renaissance film that did not pick up at the box office, and of course the controversy over Snow White. I guarantee they were originally going to race bend Rapunzel, but now all of the casting news that we're hearing says that they're looking at white blonde actresses to play Rapunzel, so that's part of the way that they've changed. I think that their goal in the future is they're just going to continue to make these live action remakes more and more like the original one to just milk that nostalgia, and that's still bad for the industry because, like I said, we have seen that people are getting sick of these live action remakes and that they are a little bit more selective of the ones that they really rally behind, and eventually that is going to run out. So the industry still needs to prepare original films and to prepare to move away from these live action remakes because eventually it's going to become crumbling down. And unfortunately, the adults now, the parents who are taking their kids, they got to grow up in an era where Disney was making these original films, the greatest run in Pixar's history for the 2000s. They were just pumping out successful film after successful film, and now their kids are just going to the theater and seeing these slop movies, which I don't think are going to create those new feelings of nostalgia in a new generation. This nostalgia milking that Disney is doing is going to run its course, and they need to consider that. But ultimately, I have come to the conclusion that it is these companies' faults what they're pushing out there because the audience is just asked to make a choice here, and I can understand after going through all of this why live action remakes wind up being their choice when Hollywood isn't offering any better alternative here. And what would these companies want instead for their entire industry to go under? But yeah, that's where I'm at right now. So while I'm disappointed that they're going forward with these live action remakes and I think they look horrific, and I still think next year we have a lot more to choose from the theaters. We have a lot more movies to go to. I hope, maybe hoping against hope, that people don't choose to go to the Moana remake so that Disney can finally get the picture that they need to stop these films. But until then, I think that they're just a symptom of a very, very sick industry, and an industry that knows it's sick, as we saw from jabs in the Zootopia movie about the industry just becoming sequels and remakes. But ultimately, it's not the audience that needs to make choices for better. It's Disney and these companies that need to provide something better first. But that's all I got for you guys today. What do you think of all of this? And are you disheartened that they're actually going forward with a Rapunzel live action remake? Or do you think that people's nostalgia is going to get the better of them and they're going to go for it? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you want to support my channel, please consider becoming a member or a patron, and I will see you all next time.